Good day. This is the third presentation in my series of Hopkinton water system issues. Today's presentation is Hopkinton wants to buy water from the MWRA. The interbasin transfer process is a long and difficult process. I really appreciate HCAM for hosting my presentation. I'm really happy with the number of clicks and views that I got in the first one, and I'm very happy to present my view on the water issues that are coming before the town. And let's get on with the presentation. Why would you be interested in this topic? The Hopkinton DPW, Select Board, acting as Water and Sewer Commissioners, and our consultants need to understand the interbasin transfer process and what can be approved as a project. The Hopkinton citizens and water customers also need to understand what town government is undertaking and the costs that are involved. The proposed connection for 2.7 million gallons a day of MWRA water does not meet the criteria needed for Water Resources Commission approval. We probably wasted a lot of engineering. Additional engineering is needed on potential town-owned well sites as alternate solutions that meet approval criteria. The Hopkinton Water Department will be required to make significant and costly changes to operations if a water or interbasin transfer is approved by the Water Resources Commission. So, like I said, I'm Ken Weismantel. I live at 145 Ash Street in Hopkinton. I am a current member of the Water Resources Commission, have been for 10 years. Former member and chair of the Planning Board for 2 terms, 10 years, 6 years as chair. Former member of the Department of Public Works Commission when we had one. Former member and chair of the Water and Sewer Commission, 2 terms. I think I chaired about 2/3 of that time. And I've been in a lot of other activities in town, both elected and in appointed positions and committees for the town. Early in my career, I was assistant to the city engineer in Waukegan, Illinois. I also have employment experience, including consulting, process systems, and a lot of government contracts. I have a Bachelor of Science in Mechanical Engineering and a Master's in Industrial Administration from Purdue University. I'm speaking here as a Hopkinton resident. I am not representing the Water Resources Commission, or I'm really not stating exactly how they might react to our an application for an interbasin transfer, partly because the paperwork for that doesn't exist yet. I have been involved in several interbasin transfer approvals while I've been on the Water Resources Commission. The Water Resources Commission enforces the law regarding the transfer of water from one basin to another and across town boundaries. The Water Resources Commission leads the water conservation efforts in the Commonwealth. And I voted this last year to accept the performance standards for guidance, which informs both our staff and applicants on how an interbasin transfer will be evaluated. Hopkinton does not have a right to an interbasin transfer and MWRA water. The Interbasin Transfer Act, the legislation, was designed to protect the environment and to protect the donor basins. Interbasin transfer approval is the last resort solution after implementing all in-basin sources and conservation measures. Any Water Resource Commission decision might seem like micromanagement of the Hopkinton Water Department. If the interbasin transfer is the best option for the Hopkinton water needs, prepare for operational changes, specifically on unaccountable water. I suggest the town talk to other towns that have recent interbasin transfer approvals and read the minutes and the presentations by the Water Resources Commission staff, all of which are available online. Expect the Water Resource Commission review of compliance with past MEPA decisions. And certainly don't give up the current relationship we have with Ashland until you have something else approved. This is an extremely long-term process, and approval is not certain. An approval of 2.7 million gallons of MWRA water is probably, certainly not, will not be approved. The performance standards for guidance. As I said, we published this document last year to assist public water suppliers in preparing the Environmental Impact Report, or EIR, with information that's needed to evaluate an interbasin transfer request. We have the website here, if anyone really wants to get into the details. It does help if the consultant has experience with writing an interbasin transfer environmental impact report, and also it helps if they've dealt with the water resources staff in the past. The following will summarize the key sections as it applies to Hopkinton. So these are the 7 sections in the performance standards for guidance. The first is compliance with the Massachusetts Environmental MEPA report. And that one's almost a given because we won't accept the application as complete until it has everything that's in it required. This next 1, 2, and 3 are the key ones for Hopkinton. That's why they're underlined. One is to develop all viable in-basin sources in the receiving area. And the third one is we have to implement all practical water conservation measures. The forestry management program is not applicable to this type of interbasin transfer, so we won't discuss that. Maintaining a reasonable in-basin flow or in-stream flow, that's for the basin that's giving up the water. We'll talk a little bit about that, but that shouldn't be a problem for Hopkinton. And the impacts of groundwater withdrawals are not applicable to this application, and the cumulative impacts should be able to be a positive thing for the application. So there's only 2 parts that are really key for writing the engineering impact report. The Water Resources Commission must make positive findings on all of these sections in order that a Hopkinton interbasin request is approved. So let's go through all of them. The first is the compliance with the Massachusetts Environmental Policy Act. The EIR is the application. There's a lot of work to prepare this work. Typically takes 2 to 3 years to get it to the point where it's done. You can talk to the Water Resources Commission staff before you submit it. Give them draft sections. They'll comment on it. Normally, water suppliers do not spend so much time on detailed design before they talk to the Water Resources Commission staff. What Hopkinton has spent money on is not likely to be approved. Hopkinton approval clock does not start till the Water Resources Commission votes to accept the MEPA submission as complete. This is a typically long 3-year process. And Hopkinton is not at the starting line, to give a marathon analogy. We need to understand the costs to implement the changes to the water department operation That will be required with a interbasin approval with conditions. Do not go down the path that you forgo all other options before you get Water Resources Commission approval. Some key things in the environmental impact report. Why do we need the additional water? My last presentation was talking just about that subject itself. What is the current situation with all of our wells, etc.? A key one is, have all in-basin sources been explored, especially potential well sites in the Fruit Street and Pratt properties? This might require testing. In-basin sources could be our existing wells with treatment. They do supply water. Might not be the best with iron and manganese today, but if you treated for that, it's a good source of water. What is the preferred solution? This is where the Hopkinton makes its case. And what are the alternate solutions? And that's a key part of the MWRA process. And the key part for that is, what are the technical and cost reasons not to treat existing water to remove iron, manganese, and PFAS? What is the Hopkinton's unaccountable water history? And what steps has Hopkinton done to improve it to an acceptable range? We're not anywhere near the acceptable range at this particular point. There will be conditions to get us there, and we should be starting to get there before you go through the whole approval process. What are our conservation practices? Billing frequency, rate structure, billing format, reach out program to largest users, drought plan per the current standards, leak detection efforts, water meter replacement, customer communication regarding leaks and water restrictions. These are a lot of the conservation practices that a very good best practices water supplier has in place. And Hopkinton will be required to put them in place if they get a interbasin transfer request for the using MWRA water. And also in the EIR, it's kind of whatever the staff also needs to evaluate Hopkinton's request. A lot of time it's an iterative process of submitting one portion and they say, hey, but we need a little bit more to kind of really make the evaluation. It's a very professional staff on the Water Resources Commission, and but they are very thorough. So the key one, and this is the key one for Hopkinton approval: develop all viable in-basin sources in the Hopkinton area first. Continuing purchasing of the Ashland treated water. We take about 40% of our needs from the Ashland water treatment plant on the Hopkinton Reservoir. It's less expensive than the MWRA water. I almost guarantee that this will be a viable in-basin source. Currently, we're designing a system that replaces this water. We should keep it. Second of all is to treat Fruit Street wells 1, which is currently used, maybe 2 and 3 if it's worthwhile. 6, the Whitehall wells 4 and 5, with a new iron, manganese, and PFAS treatment plant on the Water Department-owned land on Fruit Street, with extra capacity for additional wells. Probably less capital costs and expenses. And we have a great example in the recently completed Littleton water treatment plant, and less operating expenses than MWRA water. This is likely a viable in-basin staff or in-basin source. Need to discuss this with the Water Resources Commission staff, because if that is considered more viable and you don't have technical or economic reasons why that doesn't work, then you've got to do all viable in-basin sources in the receiving area. This is a couple pictures I took at Littleton when the Water Sewer Advisory Board took a tour up there. Basically, the Littleton plant does 1.8 million gallons a day, iron, manganese, and PFAS treatment. It cost $20 million in a couple years ago. There's a website there if people want to see it. It was engineered by Ty and Bond engineers. I was impressed by the plant. It costs probably less than the MWRA connection, and the water is spectacular. In fact, if you drink Gatorade in this area, you're drinking Gatorade that was made from water from this particular plant, because that Littleton Water provides the company that makes Gatorade and other drinks in this area. So developing all in-basin sources is required. You have to look at the new well sites that are owned by the water department, and that were previously identified as being in the aquifer and include treatment if needed. But we have the Pratt property well site, and we have 2 wells on the Freed Street property that have been identified as water department areas. Quite frankly, these are very likely viable in-basin sources. Prillo Farms, it depends on what happens with the federal PFAS limits. We're currently below the Commonwealth standards for PFAS, just a little bit above the federal ones. We could move the well 6 PFAS treatment tanks to that area if we needed that water. I have a feeling that if you treat the Whitehall water, which is not really drinkable because of iron and manganese today, that you won't need the Prillo Farm wells. There is a potential well site that's been identified on the east side of Whitehall on DCR land. This is probably not so viable due to the complexity of getting permission to not only test, but then potentially do a land swap with DCR for this particular land. But it is a source that has been identified and will have to be proven that it's not really the most viable source. I sense that will be fairly easy to do with the Water Resources Commission staff. This is a key one, and it's a finding the Water Resources Commission must find, and the water system must have implemented all practical water conservation measures. These are going to be costly changes to the operations. You should be implementing the easy ones now. 1, so that you can say you're doing it, and 2, that they are truly the best practices. Simplest one, switch to gallons from hundreds of cubic feet on your bills. Who knows what 100 cubic feet of water looks like? But everyone knows what a gallon looks like. Another thing you need to do is to talk to your biggest users regarding water conservation and document it and see what they can do to reduce their water usage. Good systems have a system that identifies leaks and gives homeowners an email or a notice of whether they're using too much water or abnormally high water, or whether there's a potential leak. One of the requirements will be to switch to quarterly water bills. That way you'll know what your use is a little bit better than the semi-annual that we currently have. And maybe you'll see that you got a high bill, and maybe you'll do a different, you'll find the leak. Also, quarterly bills could be set up so that you could do a summer rate, which is another way to reduce our peak water usage. And expect, because it's been in the Water Resources Commissions for the last several interbasin transfer approvals, a condition to go to monthly bills in the future. This is going to cost, it was estimated, about 4% to the Hopkinton water bills just to switch over for this. The drought management plan needs to be rewritten to the latest guidance. Other things, the yearly M36 audit should be done. We didn't include that in the budget this year. We've gotten grants to do it in the past. They hope to get a grant next fall. But that's the type of thing that particularly a community that has high unaccountable water for the last decade should be looking at that audit and implementing what the audit says to try to reduce that number. And quite frankly, some people at DEP thinks that we've been fudging some of the numbers. That doesn't help with the approval process. One of the requirements is to replace at least 10% of the water meters almost every year. Water meters in about the residential ones wear out in the 10 to 12, maybe 13, 14 year mark, and they all read low. That could be a very reason why the unaccountable water is low. But you will be required to do a water replacement program, and it might have to be done all in 1 year, which is not what you really want to do, as a condition of the interbasin transfer. You need to calibrate master and big user meters regularly. I think we do some of that. Look at all the Water Conservation Commission's conservation conditions that have been on recent interbasin transfer approvals and expect and budget for the same. We don't do the greatest job on wellhead protection. We might be using those wells for a long time. Let's keep the salt out of the wells. Let's keep everything else well protected. There's a requirement that there be full cost pricing. And I think Hopkinton does do this, but that means that the water users are bearing the full cost of the change. And one good news is the Hopkinton rate structure meets conservation pricing standards as it currently sits, but it could be improved to send even a bigger conservation signal. The next one is not a problem. Basically, the last two were 2 and 3 on the list. 4 is not applicable. 5 is to maintain reasonable in-stream flow. The MWRA Quabbin source is not a problem. This section is really just a copy and paste from previous approvals, and it will not be questioned by the staff or most of the members, and that's kind of a given. Item 6 is also not applicable, and then we have the last one, which is cumulative impacts, which is kind of everything that's not in above. I don't expect that to be a problem, partly because the the Quabbin Reservoir source is not a problem. I doubt there'll be any other cumulative environmental impacts that are applicable to Hopkinton and will not be questioned by the Water Resources Commission staff and most members. So, what do we got to do also? Maybe some peer review of the current design and alternatives. Do we need some help implementing? Does Hopkinton need to do all that scope in Southborough to pump water, especially if it's significantly less than 2.7 million gallons a day? Hopkinton needs a peer review of what's there. The current water consultant was Southborough's water consultant, and I think they understand what needs to go through Southborough, but is it really needed if that number is significantly less? And if the number is really significantly less, is it going through Ashland more cost effective? That was the original request. with Weston and Sampson when they were the consultants. And we also have approval up to 1 million gallons a day from the Ashland plant, which we can't use due to reservoir levels. But Ashland might be more cost-effective than going through Southborough. Does Hopkinton need a consultant with interbasin transfer approval experience? Our current one doesn't. Weston Sampson has done it before. It helps if you've done it before. Doing it the first time always takes longer and is more expensive. Does Hopkinton need a consultant with water treatment plant experience? The designers, Ty and Bond, that did the Littleton plant are an example of somebody that really has that water treatment plant design experience. And if treatment is our solution, maybe we need a consultant that says really what that number is, as opposed to a number that might be a little bit higher because the current consultant has some uncertainty of what those costs might be, because that isn't their normal, what they're known to be good at consulting with. And does Hopkinton's need some operations consultants to help implement likely water resources imposed conditions? This has to do with water or unaccountable water. So the focus should be on what studies and what narrative needs to support the need and the alternatives, including well sites and treatment, to meet the information on the performance standards for guidance. Please talk with Water Resources Commission staff and then write the ER before you do another thing. Get the Water Resource Commission approvals for the interbasin transfer first, then focus on finalizing design details. The Southborough agreement, if it's needed, doesn't need to be done before you get the approval. They need to be making progress on that, and know that they're willing to do it. But quite frankly, you need to get the Water Resource Commission approval first before you can finalize any design details. What if they only approve 300,000 or 400,000 gallons and you've designed for 2.7 million gallons a day? The town is premature in any efforts to get a SRF loan for this. You can't, under the interbasin transfer, you're not going to be able to build it for 3 to 4 years. And they don't, the state doesn't want to tie up money on projects that aren't going to be built right away. And finally, if you're putting a line or a pump station in the shadow of the Hopkinton LNG facility, you got to make sure that it survives a major event if this is key source of Hopkinton's water, because this is the type of event where we'll really need the water. So this is a teaser. What if there's an alternative that uses in-basin sources, does not require MWRA water, is less capital cost, less operating cost, maintains Hopkinton's independence, and does not require Water Resource Commission approval with all the conditions that will come with it? Stay tuned for the next presentation. And as usual, I am available to Hopkinton residents. Can call me, or you can email me in care of HCAM with any questions. I thank you for the opportunity to present this to you, and I thank you for listening, and I thank HCAM for allowing me to make this presentation. Thank you very much.